This episode of Hitch to Homicide contains depictions of child abuse and graphic mutilation of human bodies. Viewer and listener discretion is advised.
In the 1980s, one ruthless and sadistic killer terrorized the state of Texas. Known for his extreme brutality, he murdered at least 4 victims, often torturing them before taking their lives. His spree included the horrifying mutilation of his victims, leaving seasoned investigators shocked at the scenes. Fueled by drugs, sexual violence, and insatiable thirst for blood, his reign of terror finally came to an end in 1989, when he was arrested and ultimately sentenced to death. This is a chilling story of the most savage crimes. This is Ricky Lee Green, the Butcher of Texas. Hey y'all, I'm Chris Calvert.
And I'm her husband, Rob Pottle. Welcome to Hitch to Homicide.
For better or worse.
Till death do us part.
Everybody.
Yes, welcome. And for our friends in Mali, which is in West Africa, Ibisimila.
Very nice. Welcome, Africa.
Yes.
Well, wherever you're listening, be sure to hit that subscribe button, then like, rate, and review the podcast so others who love true crime just like you can find us.
Yep.
And if you're watching us on YouTube, be sure to hit that subscribe button below.
Mm-hmm.
You can find us on Instagram at Hitch to Homicide or on X at H2H_podcast. And if you want true crime with us every single day of the week, and of course it's October right now, and you need some scary movie recommendations because we've got them up in there,
yep.
Please go join our closed Facebook group, The In-Laws and Outlaws. Go to Facebook, type in H2H, In-Laws and Outlaws, answer a couple questions, and you're in. Go join. These are my favorite people in the world.
There's a bunch of fun.
We also now have a Buy Me a Coffee link if you want to send Rob some coffee.
Yes.
He drinks it every single episode.
I'm drinking it right now.
You can find that link in our show notes. You can also send us a text. The link to that is at the top of the show notes. It says, send Chris and Rob a text. Mm-hmm. We'd love to hear from you.
We're getting some good texts.
We are. Bring them on. Keep them coming.
Yep.
Also, we want to send a shout out to all those folks in North Carolina and Tennessee.
Yes.
My mother's hometown was destroyed during Hurricane Helene.
Yep.
Literally almost wiped off the face of the earth.
Yeah.
We even lost power here in Kentucky. And we record a little bit sooner. This is the first chance I've had to say anything about it, but we will have a link in the show notes if anyone would like to toss $1 or $2 to help those people out.
Yeah.
Our hearts go out to them.
I lived in North Carolina for 14 years and was always going hiking up at Chimney Rock and Lake Lure and all those areas, Asheville. And it's heartbreaking.
Because, I still have family there.
Yeah.
It's just gone. It's gone, y'all.
So please help out.
Please help out if you can. There'll be more than one way you can give. If you're not interested in giving to the Red Cross, there'll be a couple of other links in there too. Right. Well, this case, Rob, gets a trigger warning.
Okay.
This guy was BAD bad.
As your mother used to say, you're BAD bad.
That was my mom, BAD bad, from Boone, North Carolina, from Asheville, North Carolina.
Yeah.
God love her. Her people are still digging out right now.
Yep.
Before I get started, let me thank some sources. The Fort Worth Star-Telegram, Wikipedia, Murderpedia, Medium.com, JustiaLaw.com, TexasHistory.unt.edu, Scary Facts, Serial Killer Documentary, a brutal serial killer who was in a killing frenzy, Ricky Lee Green, the Texas True Crime Blog, and there is a book, Blood Rush, by Patricia Springer. Patricia was actually a reporter who covered this case. I read through many of her articles while I was researching this. She ultimately became like a trusted person in Ricky's life. I don't want to say friend, but she met him and she basically wrote his story.
Wow.
And we'll have a link to that and all the other sources in the show notes.
That sounds good. Well, you ready?
I am.
Let's do it.
Ricky Lee Green was born on December 27th, 1960, to William Jefferson Green Jr. and Jessie Lou Pardue. If that's not a Texas name, I don't know what is.
Jessie Lou.
Jessie Lou Pardue in Fort Worth, Texas.
Gotcha.
His was not a happy childhood. As a young boy, Ricky was abused by both his father and his grandfather throughout his childhood. Bill Jr. and Jessie Lou had several children. Ricky and his siblings suffered daily abuse from their father, who would punch them in the stomach, hold them underwater until they almost drowned, and he would force them to hold on to the electric fence and gate that surrounded their property until they basically passed out.
Oh, my God. Wow.
When Ricky is 2, his parents have another son, Tony Allen Green, but Tony was a sick little boy. Tony was actually diagnosed with leukemia at a very young age. When Ricky is 6, his father forced him and his older brother, Perry, to run from the house, like take off from the front porch, while his dad sat on the porch with a BB gun.
What?
His dad would tell him to run while he shot the BB gun at little Ricky.
I thought my dad was tough on me when I got in trouble one time. He wouldn't let me go to the county fair.
Yeah.
Jeez.
I read that no matter how fast Ricky ran, he was always hit by the BBs, shot by his dad.
Wow.
And when he asks his dad about this, like, please stop shooting at me, his father told him he should learn to run faster. Yeah.
Wow.
Ricky's mom, Jessie Lou, would try to stop her husband from abusing the kids, but he would beat her severely each time she tried to intervene or step in to protect her children. One time, she gathered up the kids while Bill Jr. was away at work, and she flees 60 miles away to the other side of Fort Worth. But Bill, her husband, found them, put a gun to Jessie Lou's head, saying, if you ever leave me again, I'll kill you.
Wow.
Ricky's abuse was both physical, sexual, and verbal. He was constantly belittled by his father, who told him he was no good and never would be. When Ricky is almost 8 years old, his little brother Tony dies of leukemia at age 6. I mean, it just makes me wonder, how did they treat the sick kid if this is how they treated the kids who were, okay?
Right, right.
Ricky also had an accident when he was a little boy while playing cowboys and Indians with his brother. A piece of barbed wire caught him in the face, in particular in his left eye.
Ouch.
And it ripped his pupil out.
Oh.
His mom rushed him to the hospital where the doctors gave him a glass eye. They couldn't save his eye. When Ricky is 11, he decides he's had enough and he's going to run away. He made it all the way to Casino Beach on the shores of Lake Worth. And while he's there, a man approaches him asking if he wanted a ride into Cowtown, Texas. Okay. That's really the name of a town.
Okay.
Cowtown, Texas.
All right.
So Ricky gets into the car with this guy. And as soon as he does, the man pushes him against the seat. He starts unbuttoning his pants. Ricky tries to get away, but he's a little kid.
Yeah.
And the man raped Ricky. And when he was finished, he looked at Ricky and said, quote, "My name's John, kid," end quote. After this, John sort of holds him captive. John forces Ricky to have sex and to look for food scraps in trash cans. He's like a homeless guy. Yeah. And after a week of being sexually molested, Ricky's dad finds him. And Ricky's actually happy to see his father because he'll take a beating from his dad any other day of the week over being raped by this homeless guy named John.
Right.
Bill Sr. puts Ricky in his car, and then he goes after John, the homeless man, shouting at him. And when Bill gets into the car with Ricky, he tells him, "You're going to your grandfather's cabin in Possum Kingdom Lake to live," because he didn't want Ricky around him.
Really?
He was like he was disgusted with his son.
Geez.
And on the second night of Ricky's stay with his grandfather came into his room in the middle of the night with a rubber hose, slapping it against his palm. And that's not a euphemism.
Yeah.
It really was a rubber hose. Oh. He told him that he knew what went on between him and the homeless man, John, and he threatened to tell his father. After this threat, he sexually abuses Ricky and molests him.
What is going on?
Well, I have to think that the grandfather sexually abused Ricky's dad.
Yeah, okay.
And
Makes
they're just
sense.
passing it on down.
Sure.
You know, somewhere along the line, you have to break that chain.
Sure.
Ricky couldn't figure out why his family, who was supposed to love him, would hurt him. The sexual abuse went on for the next 2 weeks until Ricky's dad picked him up. But Ricky didn't tell his father what happened. He was just cast back into this abusive home where his father beat all the children on a regular basis. And Ricky wasn't the only one running away. Ricky's sister Teresa actually escaped twice. The second time she runs away, she went straight to the police where she told them that her father, Bill Green Jr., had been sexually and physically abusing her.
Wow.
So the deputies at the Wise County Sheriff's Office, they take photos of little Teresa's badly beaten and bruised body and put her into the foster care system. But the deputies never questioned or investigated Bill Jr. about any of it. None of it.
Jeez.
When Ricky is 15, he's ready to fly the coop again. He has a friend pick him up at a gas station that his dad actually owned and drop him off in downtown Shreveport, just east of Texas.
Okay.
And Ricky heads towards the railroad tracks where he's immediately jumped and beaten and robbed and then raped. And as his rapist walks away, he laughs. And Ricky's now 15. He's not a tiny little boy. He's furious.
Yeah.
And he picks up a large stick. He goes after this guy. And when he catches up, Ricky beats the man. He bludgeons him with this big stick until he's unconscious.
Wow.
He never knows if this guy was dead or alive when he walked away. And he really didn't care.
Right.
A couple of months later, Ricky is arrested for joyriding, stealing a car and driving it around. And he's a minor, so his parents are notified and they come pick him up. I want to stop for a second. Joyriding. But that used to really be a thing where you would like take a car and go for a joyride, but you'd always bring it back.
Right.
It just makes me think of this. There was a little girl who got in the car and drove to Target and bought some stuff
I saw that.
and got back in the car again.
She was like 12 or something.
I mean, I have to give her props for it. When I saw that, I was like, I realized that was a dangerous situation. Thank goodness she didn't get hurt. But on the flip side, she's got a story to tell for the rest of her life.
Yeah, and the fact that she's very money conscious because she went to Target.
I don't know about that. My purse strings are a little loose when I go to Target. So, yeah. Me and Target, we have this relationship.
This symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, you don't tell Target what you need. Target tells you when you get there what you need to buy.
Yeah.
But anyway, he's arrested for joyriding. And his parents are notified. They come pick him up. And when he turns 16, Ricky actually drops out of school and goes to work for his father as a radiator repairman.
Okay.
Now he's going to work for his dad until he's 21. And that's when he notices a girl, Mary Frances Irene Collette.
Okay.
Now, Ricky's father owns a compound of buildings 2.5 miles west of Boyd, Texas, where they lived on Highway 114.
Okay.
And Bill Jr.'s business had expanded to Green's Radiator Shop, Green's Gulf Station, and Green's Steakhouse.
So they're doing pretty well.
They're doing pretty well.
Yeah.
But I just thought, I don't know how you go from a radiator. I could get the, going from a radiator shop to a Gulf station,
Right.
which is a gas station if you don't know what Gulf is. But then to Green's Steakhouse. I thought that's a little bit of a leap.
Hey, listen, when you're working on radiators, you get hungry.
Apparently, and you need a steak. And it is Texas, and there's some really good steak in Texas.
Oh, yeah.
But Mary Frances was a waitress at the steakhouse right next to the radiator shop where Ricky worked for his dad.
All right.
Now, these two began dating and then quickly moved in together. Mary Frances is a single mother, and she brings her son with her into their relationship. These two are together for 4 years, and when he's 23 years old, he marries Mary Frances on February 17th, 1984, in Wise, Texas.
Okay.
Mary Frances was the closest thing Ricky had to a real family. But their relationship was mostly based on sex, not really love and support. Mm-hmm. And after just 2 months of marriage, things started to fall apart. So they were together for years. Then they got married. And after 2 months, it all starts to go to hell in a handbasket.
Nope. Okay.
Ricky thought his new wife was sleeping with other men.
Why would he think that?
I mean, he's not right. He ain't right in the head, honey.
That's true. It's true.
So to escape, because he thinks his wife is cheating on him, he would drown his sorrows in alcohol and then would drive around town a lot, or in the country roads, on the country roads out in the country.
Right.
So drinking and driving to escape the idea that his wife was cheating on him.
Wow.
Then one day while he's working for his dad, he's bored and he starts making prank calls.
You're making this up.
I am not. I mean, this is a grown-ass man.
Wow.
Making prank calls, which of course you could do back then because we didn't have caller ID.
Sure. Right.
But a 17-year-old girl named Connie McKeever is answering this phone, and Ricky starts harassing her on the phone. He starts calling her like 5 times a day. He's like breathing heavy. But he tells her that he's been watching her, which made me think of that, the movie, Have You Checked on the Children?
Oh, yeah.
Have you checked the children? What is that called? When a Stranger Calls.
When a Stranger Calls.
When a Stranger Calls. We didn't put that one on the list, y'all. We got to put it on the list. But, somebody's calling saying, have you checked the children? Well, he's calling and saying, I've been watching you.
Wow.
And Connie's terrified.
Yeah, of course.
She wouldn't go to school alone. She came straight home from school afterwards because she was afraid that he was out there waiting to get her, like Michael Myers, standing in between the sheets.
Yeah.
Connie's parents go to the police and ask them to place a wiretap on their phone so they can find out who this guy is.
Right.
And when Ricky called, the police showed up at his door as soon as he hung up the phone.
Oh.
They booked him and put him in jail, where he stayed overnight until Mary Frances could beg Bill Jr., Ricky's dad, for the $500 she needed to bail him out.
I'm sure that went over very well.
Yeah.
Now he's got to give money to bail his son out.
Yeah, and he doesn't like his son.
Yeah.
6 months later, after coming home from one of his late-night drives to, quote, clear his mind, drinking and out in the country,
right.
Mary Frances came home from work, and he asked her to come and sit on his lap. And she does. Then he reaches under the couch cushion, and he pulled out a knife, and he puts it to her throat. This is his wife.
Wow.
He tells her to take off her clothes and lay on the floor. He's drunk. His words are slurred. And he starts running his knife up and down her body, telling her that she's way too good for him. Yeah.
Yeah, I would think
she is.
Yeah, that's an understatement.
Now, in more than one source, I read that he raped her at knife point. But after he passed out on top of her before he could do anything with the knife. Mary Frances packed her bags and walked out the door, and she never came back.
Imagine that.
But Ricky's not going to be alone for very long. 6 months after Mary Frances walks out the door, Ricky is at his favorite bar in Cowboy City, Texas. I'm telling you, I love the names of these towns. Cowtown, Cowboy City.
Where are you from?
I love it.
I'm from Cowboy City,
I love
Texas.
it. It's like I kept picturing Yellowstone the whole time I was doing the research.
Yeah.
But he's looking for love in all the wrong places.
All right.
He meets this woman named Barbara. Barbara asks him to dance, and after, she takes him over to where her friends are sitting together, all 6 of them. There's 6 women, and included in those 6 women was a woman named Sharon Dollar. And he was immediately smitten with Sharon.
Okay.
Sharon was a preacher's kid who had kind of been through the ringer. Her first husband was a paranoid schizophrenic who would beat her and even kick her in the stomach while she was pregnant with their daughter.
Wow.
He would also sexually abuse her. But Sharon goes from the frying pan into the fire because her next relationship, her boyfriend would beat her, kick her, lock her in their apartment, not allowing her to leave for work. And when she would try to escape, he would chain her to the bed.
What's in the water down there?
I don't know.
Jeez.
She's finally away from this man when she meets Ricky. That's why I'm saying she's going from out of the frying pan and into the fire.
Wow.
Ricky tells her that he would never mistreat her. Whatever.
Yeah.
1 week after he meets Sharon, he shows up at her apartment, tells her that he doesn't want to work for his father anymore, and asks her if he could stay with her. But he's too afraid to tell his dad that he's not going to work with him anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So he sends Sharon to do it for him.
Okay.
Yeah. Got nothing? You got nothing?
I got nothing on that. That makes no sense at all.
Well, he's afraid of his dad, so I'm going to send my new girlfriend who doesn't know him. So what's she afraid of? She doesn't know.
Yeah, but she's an idiot to even think that she would have to do that.
Yeah, well.
Jeez. Okay.
Mm-hmm. After this, Ricky said that being away from his dad was the happiest he's ever been.
I can imagine.
But he's drinking a lot. And when Sharon and Ricky have their very first night together, it was just a binge of alcohol and sex. And the more Ricky drank after that, the more he wanted to have sex, and the more he wanted to have kinky sex. So these two would go to downtown Fort Worth to like porn shops because they're trying to keep their sex life exciting, and they're looking for more than a fuzzy pair of handcuffs. They're looking for someone to have a threesome with them.
Oh, wow.
One time, while Sharon has Ricky tied to the bed during sex, she gets out a needle. Sorry, guys. And she pricks Ricky's penis. He screams and looks down and sees that he's bleeding, and Sharon starts laughing, and she starts sucking the blood.
Wow.
And this is when Ricky sees that Sharon has a real taste for blood.
Wow.
That's called foreshadowing.
Uh-oh.
Guys, I'm sorry I had to leave that in.
I almost couldn't play that.
Everybody's crossing their legs. I'm sorry.
I had my legs crossed while I played that.
One weekend, when Sharon and her daughter take a trip to Connecticut to see the daughter's father, Ricky misses her, and he's afraid that Sharon's going to hook up with one of her old lovers in Connecticut. And he starts drinking so he doesn't have to think about it. And he's been driving around, and now he's sitting in the parking lot at Casino Beach when this 16-year-old boy is standing in front of his car. Now Ricky gets out of the car to throw away his beer cans, and he sees Jeffrey Lynn Davis.
Okay.
Jeffrey is 16 years old, and he's a runaway. And Ricky knows this because he's had an encounter with him before. When Jeffrey was just looking for a place to crash, Ricky and Sharon gave him a bed for the night. That's it, though, just a bed. He wasn't part of a threesome.
Right.
So he sees Jeffrey, and he says hi. He offers him a beer. These two sit on the hood of Ricky's car and drink their beers. And this is when Ricky asks Jeffrey if he wanted to go to Bend Brook Lake with him. And when they get there, they see a group of college kids. They're all drinking, doing shots, they're smoking weed. And of course, Ricky is coming on to all of these girls. And he's striking out. Yeah, because he's an older guy, and these are like college kids.
Right.
He tells Jeffrey that he's ready to go. He wants to leave. They drive around the lake for about an hour and finally pull over so Ricky can get out of the car and pee by the side of the road. He's got to go to the bathroom.
Okay.
And when he gets back in the car, Jeffrey had pulled down his pants and was fondling himself. And Jeffrey reaches over and touches Ricky's thigh and asks him if he wanted to touch him. And Ricky punches Jeffrey, opens his door, drags him out of the car. Then Ricky beat him within an inch of his life.
Wow.
And he only stops when he thinks he might kill Jeffrey.
Gee whiz.
He puts Jeffrey back in the car and drives, telling him to keep his head down. But Jeffrey wasn't listening to him, and every time he lifted his head from the seat, Ricky punched him in the face.
Man.
And when he'd had enough, he pulled over. He dragged Jeffrey out of the car and into the woods and started beating and kicking him again. Then he went back to the car, opened the glove box, and pulled out a large pocket knife. And using the 6-inch blade, he cut Jeffrey's throat from his right ear to his left shoulder.
Wow.
Then Ricky tries to decapitate him. But he tires out. He's only got a 6-inch blade.
Right.
And he gets tired and he gives up. And then he yells at Jeffrey, quote, "You f***ing homo," end quote.
Wow.
Then he grabbed Jeffrey's penis. I'm sorry, guys. Sliced it off at the base and tossed it in the lake. Then he stabbed Jeffrey's dead body over 15 times.
Wow.
When he's finished, he picks up Jeffrey and puts him in the floorboard of his car. Now, there has to be a ton of blood, right?
Right.
Yeah. But he gets on the road. He stops at a gas station for more beer. He goes into the convenience store while Jeffrey's dead and mutilated body is in the floor of the back seat of his car.
Good grief.
He's not even covered up.
Man.
He gets his beer and he heads toward Lake Worth. And he turns into the Fort Worth Nature Center. He's looking for a place to hide the body.
Right.
He heads toward the marshy areas around Greer Island. He drags Jeffrey Davis out of the car to a natural rock trench by the water, and he crams Jeffrey's body into the rocks.
Mm.
Now, when Sharon gets back from her trip to Connecticut, Ricky tells her, "I killed this kid." And she consoles him and tells him that she doubts anybody saw him. "It's okay, honey. I doubt anybody saw it."
Good grief. Okay.
The next day, a couple hiking in the Fort Worth Nature Center stumbles upon the decomposing body of Jeffrey Davis. Ricky's terrified, but police never question him or ever think that he is a suspect.
Wow. They find this body and they have absolutely no leads whatsoever.
They got no leads.
Wow.
Ricky and Sharon get married on September 20th, 1985. But now that they're married, Ricky feels restless. Just 2 weeks after this, on October 12th, 1985, Ricky picked up his stepdaughter from Sharon's mother and was driving along Highway 287 when he sees a woman hitchhiking. He pulls over and offers her a ride. She tells Ricky that she'd been riding with a motorcycle gang when she got into an argument with her boyfriend, who'd left her on the side of the road after beating her up.
Wow.
"Thank you for never setting me out on the side of the road, honey, even when I'm backseat driving."
I would never do that.
He's thought about it, y'all.
No, I have not.
I'm bad because I'll be like, "No, turn here. Why are you going this way?"
But that's your job.
Apparently, yeah, that's my job as your wife, right?
Yep.
I think there are a lot of wives that do that. Come on, girls, take up for me.
Hey, husband, speak up for me.
The husbands know what you're talking about.
Okay.
It usually ends when you get that, "Do you want to drive?" "No, I don't want to drive." You never say that to me, though. So this woman is on the side of the road. Her boyfriend, the biker, has just stranded her there. Her name is Betty Jo Monroe. But she tells him that her boyfriend has just left her on the side of the road after beating her up. Her name is Betty Jo Monroe, but her name is, she goes by Montana because that's where she's from. And she was a Joe Montana fan. I just thought that's very Texas.
Yeah.
You know, that they just call her Montana.
Yeah.
She's a 28-year-old topless dancer originally from Amarillo. And he asks her if she'd like something to eat and a place to clean up and to take a shower. And she says yes.
Yes. First mistake.
The first of many. He introduces Montana to Sarah, his little stepdaughter, in the back seat and tells her that my name's Ricky. "Montana, it's nice to meet you. I'm Ricky."
Right.
They get to Ricky and Sharon's trailer and Montana gets in the shower. And Ricky slips into the bathroom, rips back the shower curtain, and asks Montana if he can join her.
Wow. Were there like psycho strings going on?
It's like, that is not Southern hospitality,
Yeah.
y'all. I'm just telling you now.
Yeah.
But Montana says yes. And the two of them proceed to have sex in the shower, which carried over into the bedroom.
Okay.
Now, I have to think that Ricky didn't tell Montana that he's got a wife.
Yeah. Well, actually, I don't think Montana would have really cared.
No, she does.
Oh, does she?
Yeah.
Okay.
But after this, they're in the bedroom. Ricky suggests that she stick around and be a babysitter to his stepdaughter, Sarah. And Montana says to him, quote, "Oh, all you want to do is f*** me," end quote.
Jeez.
So Ricky slapped her in the face, telling her that she better watch her mouth. And he tells her that is what is going to happen, that she is going to stay and babysit. And Montana agrees to think about it because she's afraid.
Yeah.
At 8 p.m., Ricky tells Montana that he needs to go pick up his wife, Sharon, from her job at the telephone company. Sharon opens the door to the car. She's quite surprised to see that Ricky has another woman with him and her daughter. Ricky tells her that Montana was a hitchhiker and that he'd asked her to stay and babysit. And Sharon's not all too happy about that.
Okay. I wonder why.
Well, but at the same time, this is a couple that went looking for somebody else to have a threesome with.
Yeah.
But when Ricky tells her that they can both have sex with Montana, suddenly Sharon's on board. They were finally going to get their threesome.
Okay.
At first, Montana agrees to having sex with them. This is horrible.
Uh-oh.
That is until Sharon took off her clothes.
Not a great selling point, huh?
So Montana must not have her beer goggles on, right?
Yeah.
So Ricky goes to the closet and gets out some rope. And he and Sharon tie up Montana by her wrists to the headboard of their bed because she didn't want to have sex. And they're like, no, guess what? You're having sex.
Yeah.
They tried to rape her, but Montana kept kicking and screaming, and she bit Sharon.
Wow.
So they dragged her to the bathroom where Ricky tried to sodomize her. And Montana is fighting Ricky, and he yells at Sharon to grab a knife. So Sharon goes to the kitchen and brings him a large knife back, and Ricky stabs Montana in the chest so hard that the knife breaks through one of her ribs.
Wow.
He shoves Montana into the tub. She's in shock. Montana's in shock. Ricky tells Sharon to watch her while he goes into the bedroom to get his 6-inch knife that he used on Jeffrey Davis. And when Ricky comes back, Montana tries to get away, and he stabs her again. Then Sharon takes the other knife, and together they keep stabbing Montana as she's screaming and asking them, why?
Man.
Why are you doing this? To which Ricky replied, quote, because you're a whore, end quote.
Gee whiz.
Ricky leaves the bathroom to get a ball-peen hammer. He came back to the bathroom. He strikes Montana in the head so hard he cracked her skull and rendered her unconscious. He hits her 3 or 4 more times. Then Sharon wants to take a turn. And while Sharon is hitting her with the hammer, Ricky is mutilating Montana's left breast. He's cutting it. When it was over, Montana, or Betty Jo Monroe, had 17 stab wounds and 6 slices on her body, not to mention what they'd done to her head with the hammer.
Wow.
Ricky and Sharon are covered in blood from killing Montana, and Ricky and Sharon are now turned on.
Oh.
And
man.
These two have sex in all the blood from their murder of Montana.
Good grief.
How about that?
That's pretty putrid.
It's awful.
Yeah.
After they wrap her body in newspaper and a blanket, they scrub the blood spatter from the walls of the bathroom and off the floor and the sinks and the faucet, and finally they shower to get the blood off of their bodies. And Sharon backs up her car to the trailer's front stoop, and they put the body into the trunk. Now, with all this ruckus, as you might imagine, they wake up their toddler daughter, Sarah. They put her in the back seat, dead body in the trunk, and Sharon and Ricky drive east toward the center of Boyd, Texas.
Okay.
Ricky tells her where to go. He says to drive down Highway 730 toward Decatur, where their friend Marvin lived. And Sharon stopped on a bridge in an area called Flatwood, and Ricky took the body from the trunk and threw Montana's body over the railing and into a dry creek bed 20 feet below.
Gee whiz.
They threw the knives and hammer out the window in different locations after wiping off their prints. The next day, Ricky and Sharon took little Sarah and Sarah's 13-year-old sister, Jill, to the Texas State Fair. So I just want to make sure you understand what I'm saying.
Okay.
It's Ricky and his wife, Sharon,
Right.
and then Sharon's daughter, Ricky's stepdaughter,
Right.
and Sharon's youngest sister, who is 13 years old.
Okay.
So she would be Uncle Ricky
Right.
to, the younger sister, 13-year-old sister. Her name is Jill. and they go to the Texas State Fair.
Got it.
And while they're at the fair, a state trooper, Trooper Alan Troop, can't make that up either, Trooper Troop.
This is 1023 Trooper Troop.
Trooper Troop, T-R-O-U-P.
Wow.
He's on his routine patrol when he stopped on the first bridge he came to and looked over the railing, and he can see a naked woman lying face down in the brush. And he calls Sheriff Ray Allen of Wise County, and an hour later, investigator Mark Autry arrives on the scene to recover the evidence. But there's not much evidence there to help them find her killer.
Right.
Detective Autry thinks she's been murdered elsewhere and her body then dumped over the bridge. Pretty easy to deduce.
Sure.
Police take Montana's fingerprints, but they're not a match to anything. And the case went cold very, very quickly.
Okay.
On November 23rd, 1985, Ricky wants to do that all over again.
Really?
He loved the sex he and Sharon had soaked in Montana's blood.
Ugh.
So Ricky gets all dressed up and goes out on the town to a bar. He's hunting for another woman for the two of them. He drives around North Texas for over 2 hours, searching for a vulnerable woman. He's looking for a hitchhiker.
Right.
A half a mile from the Inez 50-50 Club on the outskirts of Fort Worth, Ricky sees a woman hitchhiking. Her name is Sandra Lorraine Bailey. And she doesn't know it, but she's Ricky and Sharon's next victim. Sandra was 27. She had a 9-year-old daughter. She worked as a babysitter and lived on Fort Worth's north side. Police will later say that Sandra was slightly handicapped, stemming from an abduction and rape when she was a teenager. And according to her family, she never met a stranger. She was so friendly to everybody. And I even read where one of her family members said she was perfect.
Wow.
That night, Sandra was at the 50-50 Club for her cousin's 19th birthday party.
Okay.
And Ricky's there. He asks her where she's going. She's walking.
Right.
And she tells him that she's going to the 50-50 Club. And Ricky introduces himself, and then he invites her to come home with him where they can smoke some weed. And Sandra says, no, I'm meeting some people at the club. So he tells her, we'll get in. I'll take you to the 50-50 Club. And he tells her, I'll take you wherever you want to go. They smoke weed in the car, and then they share a kiss.
Okay.
Ricky tries to get Sandra to come home with him. And again, she says no.
No way, Jose.
She's like, I want to go to this party. It's my cousin's 19th birthday.
Right.
And as Ricky is thinking about his next move, how he's going to convince her to come with him, a cop car drives by. So Ricky decides right then, oh, okay, let's see. I'm just going to go in the club with Sandra. Let's just get out of the car and go in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, not as suspicious as picking up a woman on the highway, right? Let's just get out of the car and go in. We're together.
Right.
These two drink a few beers. He asks her for a dance. Then he slipped his hand between her legs and whispered in her ear, why don't you come to my house? I promise I'll bring you back later. And Sandra says no, she wants to stay at the club. And he tells her, I'll get some more weed for us to smoke. And she still says no. She wanted to stay at the club for her cousin's 19th birthday party.
Of course.
Now Ricky's frustrated. He spent all this time on Sandra. She won't come home with him. He tells her that he needs to make a phone call, and he walks to a nearby Texaco station, and he calls his wife Sharon to say, I've found somebody, but it's not going the way I want it to. And he tells Sharon that he would call her back if he got her to leave with him.
Okay.
So I can only imagine that he's telling her this. If I get her to come with me, you get things prepared. Get ready.
Right.
Ricky and Sandra danced for over an hour before Sandra was ready to go. And on their way to Boyd, Texas, he tells her he needs to call his weed dealer because he's promised her we'll smoke some more weed, right?
Right.
But he's actually calling his wife. And when he gets her to the trailer, he takes her to the couch. He starts kissing Sandra. And then he slipped his hands under her bra. He shouted, Sharon, shouted out his wife's name, who comes out of the bedroom butt-ass naked.
Whoa.
Sandra pushes Ricky off of her and demands that he take her home. But instead, Ricky takes off his clothes and grabbed Sandra by the arm and forced her into the bedroom. Ricky tells Sandra, we're just going to have a little fun. And Sharon tells Sandra just to take off her clothes and everything will be all right.
Wow.
Sandra makes for the door. She's leaving, but Ricky blocks her. Then Ricky took off Sandra's clothes against her will, while Sharon wrapped duct tape around her wrists and then duct taped her to the bedpost.
Gee whiz.
Just take your clothes off. Everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem like everything's going to be okay.
And just ignore this duct tape.
Yeah.
Wow.
Sandra's screaming, "Stop, why are you doing this?" Ricky slapped her in the face and told her to shut up, while Sharon stuffed Sandra's mouth with rags and duct taped her mouth shut. Now, Sandra's kicking and squirming. They grab her, they drag her into the bathroom, shoving her over the side of the tub. Ricky attempts again to sodomize Sandra, just like he did before to Montana, but she's fighting him big time. So Sharon gives Ricky a long-handled knife she'd put in the bathroom before Sandra even arrived.
Man.
Ricky stabbed Sandra in the neck and blood gushed out, but Sandra's not giving up. So Ricky tells Sharon to get the hammer from the toolbox.
Oh, no.
He hits her in the head with the hammer, knocking her into the tub unconscious. And meanwhile, Sharon's picked up the knife and starts stabbing Sandra multiple times while Ricky is bludgeoning her with the hammer.
Good Lord.
Then he took the knife away from Sharon and he starts cutting on Sandra's body. He cuts her 4 times on the right breast and twice on the left. But they'd stabbed her so brutally, they'd severed her spinal cord. And Ricky stabbed her actually 30 times.
Oh, my goodness.
Then Ricky and Sharon have sex in the middle of the murder scene in all the blood. But this time, it wasn't as exciting as the first time.
Yeah.
And after they finished, they wrap Sandra's body in newspapers and a blanket. They clean up the bathroom after they drag Sandra's body into the bedroom. But this has taken all night. And it's time for Sharon to go to work. She works for the telephone company.
Okay.
So Sandra's body was stuffed between the wall and the bed until 11 p.m. the next night,
Oh.
when Sharon's daughter, Sarah, would be asleep. Then they loaded Sandra's body into the trunk, and again, she puts her sleeping daughter in the backseat of the car, and she and Ricky looked for a place to dump the body. So on a side road between Bellevue and Henrietta, 70 miles away from their trailer in Boyd, Texas, Ricky gets Sandra's body out of the trunk and stuffs her into a culvert underneath the road. But her legs are visible. So he bent her in half at the waist and the knees, putting her into fetal position. She's been dead 24 hours at this point, so she's got to be stiff.
Yeah, a little rigor mortis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he just shoves her together and shoves her back into the culvert. He puts her in fetal position and shoves her back there.
Right.
Sharon drives them home, telling Ricky it's all going to be okay. But a week later, Texas got some heavy rain and Sandra's body was washed out of the culvert. A Lone Star Gas Company employee named Charlie Brock is actually driving to work on December 2nd, 1985, when he sees this woman's nude body all tangled up in the brush and barbed wire. So he calls the Clay County Sheriff's Office, and when police arrive, they're already thinking that this body is connected to their other body, who they think is a Jane Doe, but it's Montana.
Right.
Both bodies have been stabbed repeatedly. They're both nude. They're both dumped or hidden in the middle of nowhere, and the women were close to the same age and body type. January 1986, Ricky is investigated for the sexual abuse of Sharon's daughter, Sarah,
Really?
and Sharon's younger sister, Jill.
Wow.
But police aren't going to do a daggone thing until May of 1986, 5 months later.
Really?
Finally, in May of 86, he's arrested. But Sharon signed a non-prosecution document and a motion was filed to dismiss the charges. So she's saying, I'm going to protect my husband who kills people with me over my little sister and my daughter.
Man.
Sharon bribed her sister Jill to say she was lying about Ricky raping her. So Ricky's free as a bird.
Man.
December 29th, 1986, Ricky celebrates his 27th birthday all alone at his usual spot at Casino Beach. Remember, this is where he met up with Jeffrey Davis.
Right.
He's drinking in his car when a man he recognized as Stephen Pfefferman. By the way, this parking lot is a known spot for gay men to come and meet up.
Okay.
And he was there before. Ricky was there before, so he knew it was a spot that gay men came and met up.
Sure.
But Stephen had actually slept with Ricky once before. Stephen Michael Pfefferman was a single 28-year-old sales manager at KXAS-TV Channel 5. His friends and coworkers said he was extremely personable. He didn't have an enemy. He lived in this split-level townhouse on Fort Worth's east side. And before joining the team at Channel 5, he worked at TV stations in Chicago and West Virginia.
Okay.
He was actually born in Chicago and grew up in Skokie, Illinois. He was a member of several charitable and fraternal organizations, and he was a graduate of Tulane University. He's a great guy,
Right.
When Stephen makes it to Ricky's car, he asks if Ricky wants to go home with him. And Ricky says, yes, of course.
Well, that's not going to turn out very well.
No. And I read in more than one source that Stephen and Ricky engaged in sex in the car. So maybe oral sex first. I don't know.
Right.
But he wanted to continue whatever they'd started. But only if Stephen bought him a 12-pack of beer. So Stephen goes and he gets the beer, and Ricky tells Stephen that his wife might need the car and Stephen would need to follow him home so he could drop it off first.
Okay.
So he's willingly going with a homosexual man.
Right.
So is he a homosexual?
Well, who knows? Who knows what's going on in that twisted mind of his? And the other fact that this guy knew that Ricky had a wife at home and they were going to...
Well, it's the 80s. I'm sure Mr. Pfefferman, Stephen Pfefferman, I'm sure he was in the closet. My guess is that he was in the closet.
Right.
But Stephen drives him to Fort Worth, to the suburb where Ricky and Sharon are now living. It's called the White Settlement.
Okay.
And Ricky drops off the car and he gets into Stephen's Volvo. They drink and listen to music for over 2 hours while Stephen fondled Ricky. Then Stephen excused himself to take a shower. And while Stephen Pfefferman is in the shower, Ricky gets a knife from the kitchen. They're at Stephen's house, at his split-level townhouse.
Right.
And while Stephen's in the shower, Ricky gets a knife from the kitchen. He places it under the bed in Stephen's bedroom. When he's out of the shower, Stephen asks Ricky if he could tie him up in his bedroom while they had sex.
Jeez.
And Ricky says, well, it'll be more fun if you let me tie you up first. And Stephen agrees.
Wow.
Ricky ties Stephen to the headboard with ties, like suit ties.
Right.
And they're both consenting to this. But then Ricky reached under the bed. He pulls out this long-handled butcher knife. Stephen starts to panic, and he's flailing around. His feet aren't tied down. So Ricky goes back to the closet where Stephen got the ties, and he tied his feet up really tightly.
Wow.
Then he slashed Stephen's throat from ear to ear.
Oh, man.
But the knife must not have been super sharp because Stephen's still alive and conscious.
Right.
Ricky stabs him repeatedly, but Stephen's still awake and conscious, and he's screaming. So Ricky ran into the kitchen and got 2 more knives. Ricky stabs Stephen in the neck and in the chest with each knife. He slashes the vena cava and his liver. And while Ricky is violently stabbing Stephen, he's shouting at him, "I hate homosexuals."
Wow.
He straddled Stephen's lifeless body, continuing to stab him, hitting him in the left eye. But Stephen is still alive as he's bleeding out.
Oh, my gosh.
This is when Ricky picked up the first knife. He stabbed Stephen in the throat, then cut him open from his sternum to his scrotum. And believe it or not, Stephen Pfefferman is still alive and gasping for air.
Oh, my God.
Then for his final act, Ricky took the knife and basically sawed off Stephen's penis. He amputated it along with part of his scrotum and then shoved it into Stephen's mouth.
Oh, my God. This guy's twisted.
Twisted. When Ricky is finished, Stephen's all tied up, his body cavity open, exposing all his internal organs. He's been stabbed multiple times. At this point, Ricky feels like he's going to be sick. So he grabbed the comforter and covered up Stephen's body. Then he took like clothes and linens from his dresser and dumped those on top of Stephen's body underneath the comforter. The only thing that's visible are Stephen's feet. Ricky then ransacks Stephen's home looking for money, and while he's wrecking the house, blood from his finger fell onto the floor. And this is when Ricky started wiping off his prints from anything and everything he remembered touching. Because don't forget, Ricky's been booked before.
Sure.
They have his prints.
Right, they got a record.
He uncovers Stephen, takes the knives out of his body, cleans the handle and the blade, and then returned the knives to the same wounds. He put them back again. Then he covered him up again. Then he takes what's left of the beer from the fridge, gets in Stephen's Volvo, drives home.
Wow.
He's dozing off as he's driving home. And he even swerves. He wakes himself up, and then he hears a loud thumping, and Ricky pulls over and sees he has a flat tire on Stephen's Volvo. Okay. So he abandons the car. He walks to a payphone where he calls Sharon to come pick him up at Loop 280 and White Settlement Road.
Okay, well, now his fingerprints are in the Volvo now.
You'd think.
Yeah.
Unless he wiped it down before he left, but I mean...
He probably did. I mean, if he was that conscious of making sure that none of his prints were in the crime scene, he would, I'm sure he did.
Oh, but was he? Was he that good at the crime scene? I don't know.
All right, keep going.
Sharon comes and picks him up, and he tells his wife, Sharon, quote, "I've done something bad," end quote. Ricky, that's an understatement.
Yeah.
He was carrying a pillowcase, and Sharon can see that there's splotches of blood on the leg of Ricky's jogging suit. Now, Ricky didn't say anything to Sharon about where he'd been on that night, December 29th, but when the news breaks about Stephen Pfefferman's murder, Ricky starts to panic. They might think he's a suspect who might have seen him leave with Stephen that night.
Right.
And Sharon tells him, "You're worrying too much." And you know what? For right now, she's right.
Okay.
The next day, when Stephen doesn't show up for work, Stephen Pfefferman doesn't show up for work and doesn't call in, nobody can find him. Mm-hmm. His boss calls his landlord, Dennis McCarty, to go and check on him. And he's the one that actually found Stephen's body. Mm. And the murder case of Stephen Pfefferman goes cold.
Really?
It goes cold. Yeah.
Even though... Okay, so they have his, did they ever find the Volvo? I'm sorry, I'm stuttering here, but the whole thing doesn't make sense.
Yeah, they found the Volvo on the side of the road. They could tell he had been robbed. You know, he'd ransacked the apartment. Mm-hmm. But they didn't have any clue who had done that to him.
So obviously the Volvo was clean then. They had no prints.
Yeah.
Okay.
But at the same time, I didn't say this, but at the same time, when the police officers get there, they can barely make it through the scene.
Wow.
Obviously, I told you what the scene was. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Over the next several years, Sharon and Ricky kept up with their scheme of luring women to their home to have sex with them, only to steal from them using the money on weed and alcohol. They're not killing them.
Right.
But eventually, the weed and alcohol isn't enough for them either. Well, if they're having sex in the middle of middle of a murder scene, and that wasn't enough, weed and alcohol is not going to do the trick.
Right.
So they started shooting meth. Mm. And the more they shot up, the less they got along. Mm. In February of 1989, Sharon confesses to Ricky that she and his younger brother, Timmy, had stolen $40,000 from Ricky's dad, Bill Green Jr.
Wow.
The asshole dad.
Yeah.
They stole $40,000 so they could spend it on drugs. And Ricky then spent the next month just trying to hide Sharon in motels across the county to keep his father from murdering his wife.
Wow. So obviously the father knew that she stole $40,000.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
On March 8th, 1989, Ricky pulled up to their house and found that Sharon and her daughter Sarah had packed up their things and moved out. And even though she'd moved out, Sharon still frequently got drugs from Ricky, paying him in sex.
Okay.
She'd have sex with him in order to get drugs from him.
Sure.
Now, when Ricky's dad, Bill, found out that Ricky was still in contact with Sharon, his dad demands that Ricky kill Sharon, telling him to lace her drugs with chloroform.
Wow.
But he didn't. He actually told Sharon that was what his father was planning. And that was the last time he saw his ex-wife, Sharon.
Oh, really?
Yep. On April 26, 1989, Sharon calls Ricky up on the phone. He hasn't heard from her in months. And when she spoke, her voice was shaking. And Ricky thinks that maybe she's in jail and that's why she's calling him.
Mm-hmm.
But she tells him instead that she's in rehab.
Oh, really?
And Ricky responded by saying, quote, "You ain't gonna get me to say nothing," end quote.
Okay, so why isn't he going to say anything?
Well, either he thinks that she's setting him up,
Right.
or he thinks that she is, redeeming herself through rehab where she's going to confess everything she's done, get on the straight and narrow, get right with Jesus.
Regardless, he's not going to say a word.
I'm not saying anything.
Okay.
You're not going to get me to say anything.
All right. Just trying to understand.
But his suspicions were correct because Sharon called in a tip to the Amarillo Police Department Crime Stoppers just a few days before she called him.
Yeah.
Because she wanted the $10,000 reward that was attached to it.
Now it makes sense.
And she wanted the $10,000 reward to buy more drugs. Not because she was in rehab.
Sure.
She told the police that she had lived with Ricky. She had watched him commit 3 murders using a knife. Sharon would tell the authorities where the bodies were dumped and give details about the surroundings where they dumped them. And she tells police that his last murder, he cut the penis off of the victim in Fort Worth. And of course, the police are like, we know exactly these crimes. And she's giving details that only a killer would know.
Sure, right.
Well, the police surround Ricky's house and arrest him at midnight, April 27th, 1989, 4 years after he murdered Jeffrey Davis, Sandra Bailey, and Betty Jo Monroe, a.k.a. Montana,
right,
and 2 years after he murdered Stephen Pfefferman. Okay. Ricky's thinking that his dad turned him in. He thinks it's his father who turned him in.
Right.
And when the police get Ricky alone in the interrogation room, he doesn't ask for an attorney, and he was ready to talk about Stephen Pfefferman. They pick him up at midnight, and by 3 a.m, he's confessed in great detail how he tortured and murdered Stephen Pfefferman.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Then they moved on to the other murders that Sharon's told them that Ricky committed.
Right.
And Ricky started his confession with the 16-year-old Jeffrey Davis. Then he talked about the 2 women he'd murdered, leaving Sharon out of it.
Oh, really?
He tells the police that Sharon knew about the murders, but she didn't commit them or help hide the bodies. It was 9 a.m. the next day before Ricky's confession ended. So remember, he thinks his dad has turned him in.
Right.
And now he's protecting Sharon.
Okay.
The next day, detectives LaRue and Sorrell have the jailer bring Ricky back into the interrogation room. They throw a copy of the Fort Worth Telegram newspaper on the table, and they ask Ricky if he'd read the latest issue. And the front page had Ricky's photo, and the headline read, "Ricky Green. His wife's statement led to his arrest."
Oh, man.
And Ricky is pissed.
He loses it.
He looked up at the investigators and he's like, I need to retell this story.
Oh, man.
And this time, the truth and how Sharon had helped murder and dispose of the 2 bodies comes out. And Ricky knew that someday the long arm of the law would catch up with him, but he didn't think his own wife, Sharon, would be the one to turn him in.
Right, yeah.
On May 4th, 1989, Ricky was indicted on capital murder charges, and his bail was set at $1.25 million.
Whoa.
Ricky tried to commit suicide twice while waiting for his trial to begin. He ripped his shirt to make a noose and slipped a piece of fabric over a support bar in the ceiling and tied it around his neck and jumped from the toilet seat he was standing on. But the material ripped away from the bar. The second time, he pulled his mattress into the center of his cell, filled it with toilet paper, and set it all on fire. He grabbed a blanket and attempted to inhale the smoke. And when he started to black out, he chickened out and lifted the blanket and started crying.
What a coward.
After that, Ricky was put into isolation. And for Ricky, that was kind of a relief because he was terrified to be around other prisoners. 2 weeks after Sharon rats on Ricky, she turned herself in and played the battered wife, saying that Ricky forced her to do everything. She was charged and indicted on capital murder. Her bond was set at $1.5 million.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
Then in February 1990, Sharon's trial began. She cried to the jury of 8 women and 4 men and told them that she'd only stayed with Ricky because that was what was expected of her as a preacher's daughter. But her testimony was kind of all over the place, and she was found guilty. But she only received 10 years of probation.
What?
For the murders of Betty Jo Monroe, Montana, and Sandra Bailey.
How'd her lawyer finagle that?
The jury believed her battered wife stories. They believed she endured torture at the hands of Ricky.
Whatever.
Then in September of 1990, Ricky's trial began in Austin, Texas. It had to be moved out of Fort Worth because the media attention, and if they knew what he had actually done to this body,
right.
Because I think they kept that kind of private, but it came out during the trial. And during the trial, Mark Barta, the prosecuting attorney, said, quote, "With confessions, bloodstained knives, and photographs, the likelihood of acquittal is minimal," end quote.
Yeah.
Michael Weiner, a fingerprint specialist, got on the witness stand to say he'd found 3 prints of Ricky's at Stephen Pfefferman's townhouse. One in the bathroom, one on the table in the living room, and the third was found on a plastic hanger where Stephen Pfefferman's ties were in the closet. Remember, he went back and got more ties.
Yep. He wasn't that careful.
But most damning of all were the crime scene photos of Stephen Pfefferman. Some of the jurors had such a terrible reaction to the photos and the evidence that they had to leave the courtroom in the middle of the prosecution's case.
I can only imagine.
One female juror threw up, and the evidence was so horrific, the entire jury struggled to get through it, and some even had to seek psychiatric care afterwards because the trial, they were so traumatized by the evidence that they had seen in this trial.
No surprise.
Detective LaRue was the final nail in the coffin. He had read Ricky's written confession to the jury, and the state rested its case. So Ricky's attorney focused on the capital murder charge because they know he's guilty,
right?
But he just doesn't want him to get the death penalty.
Right.
But on September 15th, 1990, a jury of 6 men and 6 women deliberated for 3 hours and 30 minutes before finding him guilty of capital murder. So now he's going to be facing the death penalty. Ricky's family, and his attorney, they pull out all the stops. Ricky's siblings, Perry, Teresa, they testify on Ricky's behalf about how screwed up their childhood was. And Ricky's attorney wanted the jury to believe that Bill Green Jr. was really to blame. His dad was to blame.
Well, listen, his dad was an a-hole.
Yeah.
But that doesn't give you the reason to go out and just completely go nuts and murder everybody.
Yeah. But they're saying Ricky only acted the way he did because his father tormented him as a child. And because of that, he deserved a life sentence instead of being put to death.
Yeah.
Do you think it worked?
No.
It didn't work.
No, not at all.
And 35 minutes later, Ricky Lee Green was sentenced to the death penalty.
Right.
He was also sentenced to 2 life sentences for the murders of Jeffrey Davis and Sandra Bailey. The murder charges for Montana, Betty Jo Monroe, were dropped as part of a plea deal, which just meant they weren't going to stress out the system for one more trial when he's on death row.
Yeah, he's cooked anyway.
Now, while Ricky's on death row, he worked in the prison clothing factory with another inmate, Henry Lee Lucas. These 2 are a pair. We'll cover him soon. We will cover Henry Lee Lucas soon.
That's an entirely different story.
That's a whole different story. But Ricky Lee Green is suspected of actually 8 additional murders that matched his killing style and technique. Wow. But he declined to confess to the murders at the advice of his counsel. Okay. So they brought these murders forward. They were like, hey, we think these are yours. Just tell us the truth. Sure. You're going to be on death row anyway.
Yeah.
And his attorney's like, zip it. Yeah. Don't say another word.
Yeah.
But one of those murders they called Mama Doe. Mama Doe was in her late 30s and the mother of at least one based on her C-section scar. She was a hitchhiker, and her nude body was found dumped in a field in the Flatwood area of Wise County on October 13th, 1985. She was stabbed 17 times and hit with a blunt instrument believed to be a hammer.
Yeah, sounds like his MO.
She was 5'7", 135 pounds, with curly, bleached, light brown shoulder-length hair and blue-gray eyes. Sorry, I couldn't get that out. Blue-gray eyes. October 8th, 1997, after many appeals and petitions to overturn his death penalty, Ricky Lee Green was executed by lethal injection at the Huntsville, Texas unit. They had a hard time finding a vein because of his years of shooting up.
Oh, really?
And they only used one needle instead of the customary two. They could barely get one needle.
Man.
It took him 7 minutes to die after they injected the drugs into his system.
Because he's so immune to any chemicals. Wow.
His last words were, quote, "I want to thank the Lord for giving me this opportunity to get to know him. He has shown me a lot, and he has changed me in the past 2 months." The past 2 months.
Wow.
I have been in prison for 8.5 years and on death row for 7. So that's why I'm kind of like, the past 2 months. You've been there 8.5 years.
Yep.
Death row for 7. And it wasn't until the last 2 months of your life that you found Jesus?
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. But he says, I've been on death row for 7 and I have not gotten into any trouble. I feel like I'm not a threat to society anymore. Ricky, this isn't your parole hearing.
Yeah.
I feel like my punishment is over, but my friends and family are now being punished. I thank the Lord for all he has done for me, and I do want to tell the... And he was gone.
Oh, really? That was
He
it?
didn't finish his last sentence.
Wow.
I do want to tell the... End quote.
Wow.
Didn't get to finish the sentence because the drugs kicked in.
Wow.
Sharon and Ricky last spoke on the day before his arrest when she called him. In 1991, Sharon actually appeared on the Oprah Winfrey Show, keeping up with her battered wife story, and retold how she was forced to do what Ricky told her to do, and she was terrified that Ricky was going to kill her and her daughter, Sarah. But this is the same woman who bribed her younger sister to say she lied about Ricky sexually abusing her and little Sarah. Yeah. So take that for what you will. I'm going to get ugly emails from somebody who supports Sharon, sure. I am sure.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. I wasn't there, don't know. But Ricky, who seemed to pretty easily spill his guts, says that Sharon was a part of everything and willing.
Right.
But that is the story of Ricky Lee Green. And that's all I have to say about that. For nearly 7 years, Jane Doe has lived in the shadows, her past buried deep beneath layers of secrecy and silence. After completing more than was asked of her in her last assignment for the enigmatic Kywolf Project, Jane Doe vanished without a trace, leaving behind a trail of dead bodies and unanswered questions. But now, as the specter of her past returns with a vengeance, Jane finds herself thrust back into a world she thought she'd left behind forever. When her former sins come knocking on her door, Jane is faced with an impossible choice: continue to hide in the shadows, or once again take up arms against the forces that threaten to tear apart the fabric of society. With enemies lurking around every corner and allies who may not be what they seem, Jane must rely on her wits, training, and her unyielding determination to survive. And while trust is a luxury she cannot afford, Jane must confront the truth about herself and her past. As the clock ticks, she realizes that the line between family, friend, and foe are razor thin, and in the end, the only person she can rely on is herself. Jane Doe 4 Charlotte is available September 24th, 2024. No name, no regrets, no mercy.
You know, this is a very disturbing case, but the most disturbing for me is the fact that, you know, they put these people in the bathroom and cut them up and all the blood, and then they had sex with each other.
In the blood.
Yeah, in the blood.
Yeah, that was what turned her on.
Listen, you don't even want to give me a kiss after I get done mowing the yard. I mean, come on.
You know what he says to me? He'll be sweaty and he'll want to kiss me, and I'll be like, no. And he'll go, that's man stuff. That's man stuff.
That's man stuff, right?
That's
there.
not man stuff. That's just sweat on your face.
Oh,
no,
man.
thank you. You're salty. Go take a shower. Yeah. Then I'm happy to give you a kiss.
Well, Ricky got what he deserved.
Yeah. I have a feeling that those 2 months that he said, Jesus, take the wheel.
Yeah. Whatever, Ricky.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't want to say
Yeah, it's not ours to judge.
Not me to judge.
Yeah.
That's not my place to judge. That's just my opinion, though.
Yeah. Well, he got too cocky, and he had to pay for it.
Yeah, that's a bad word to use in this.
That's true.
In this case,
That's true. Mm-hmm. That's true. Mm. All right. Well, let's move away from that and go to a little bless your heart.
Well, bless your heart.
And speaking of don't get cocky.
Yes.
Here's the first one.
Okay.
In 2015, Christopher Wallace, a 24-year-old from Maine, USA, was on the run from police after allegedly stealing cooking equipment.
Cooking equipment?
Mm-hmm. Having successfully evaded the police for weeks, he started to get cocky.
Okay.
Posting to Snapchat that he was at home hiding from the police. On seeing this, a couple of his followers, they alerted the police and they went to search his home. Unfortunately, despite the tip-off, police had no luck finding him and called the search off.
Okay.
That's when Christopher posted again, saying police were in his house and he was hiding in a cabinet. The police were alerted again and searched the cabinets to find pots, pans, and a pair of feet.
Oh, my gosh.
The feet were attached to, guess, Christopher.
Yeah.
And he was placed under arrest.
Run as fast as you can.
Oh, my gosh.
Can't catch me.
Oh, Lord. All right, number 2, something smells a little fishy.
Okay.
Yeah. When something smells fishy, it's best to proceed with caution. Thankfully, one woman followed her intuition with an attempted Craigslist scam that could have left her $60 poorer with just a handful of tuna to show for it.
Oh.
The victim agreed to meet up with a 29-year-old Russell Dillon Musgrove in an Arby's parking lot to buy a PlayStation 3 for $60.
Okay.
That should have been her first clue.
Yeah.
Having originally seen a too good to be true deal on Craigslist. In the post, Musgrove said that he was desperate to get some money because he was, in a bad spot and out of gas. Isn't that what they all say?
I'm out of gas, so I'm going to sell I'm just happen to have my PlayStation 3 in the back of my car. Okay.
Yeah. Now, at the meetup, the woman sensed something was wrong and asked that Musgrove open the bag that was supposed to contain the gaming console. He countered, saying that he wouldn't hand over the bag unless she passed along the cash.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. Turns out there wasn't a PS3 in the bag, just a blanket and tuna cans. Apparently, Musgrove was in his car as this swap was going down, so he snatched a $20 bill out of the victim's hand and sped away. Now, her boyfriend, who was awaiting in another car, wrote down Musgrove's license plate number. Yep. The victim was also able to snap a picture of the tuna scammer before he made his grand getaway.
Oh,
yep.
I'm telling you.
Yeah, both the license plate number, and the picture helped police track down Musgrove, who remains at the Cabarrus County Jail after his arrest.
All for $20.
Yep.
All of that for $20.
Yep.
Not smart.
All right, number 3, and finally, I'm not drunk.
I'm not drunk. I'm tipsy.
Yeah, exactly. Florida police arrested a 23-year-old woman after she broadcast her drunk driving on the live streaming app Periscope.
What?
Whitney Bial recorded herself driving through Lakeland, Florida on a Saturday night, describing herself as effing drunk and lost while driving erratically with a flat tire.
Oh, my gosh. Seriously?
Yeah, she says in the video that drunk driving is not cool, yet she continues to live stream her unwise, inebriated activity.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, commenters reportedly told her to stop before she killed someone.
Yeah.
Lakeland received a number of phone calls from concerned viewers. They were reporting her for drunk driving, right?
Yeah.
Police officers were reportedly unfamiliar with Periscope, so one of the young officers downloaded the app and found Bial's feed. Cops found her.
That's smart, actually.
Yeah. Cops found her after identifying landmarks from the live stream. Bial ran into a curb when officers tried to pull her over. She was arrested and charged with what? DUI. Yeah, sorry, girl.
Oh my gosh. I don't think live streaming is all that smart because you can't fix it. You can only take it down.
Yeah,
and whatever
that's it.
you say is out there. I don't know. Be smart, people.
Yeah.
Be smart.
Well, these aren't smart people.
Bless his heart.
Yeah.
Well, if you have a bless your heart or you know somebody's heart who needs blessing, don't drink and drive.
Yep.
All you got to do is go to hitchtohomicide.com where there's a pull-down menu. And while you're there, you can also suggest a case.
Please do.
That's my amazing husband out there
And that's my beautiful bride in the booth.
that I never backseat drive for.
Yes, she does.
Join us next time on Hitch to Homicide.
Bye, y'all.